It's a great opportunity for me to have this conversation. Thank you, Dankrad. I hope you guys are going to enjoy it. We're going to explore some of the more recent advances in how Ethereum researchers and leadership think about scaling Ethereum. And I'm Bartek. I'm from L2Beat. I'm like a skeptic, like a blockchain skeptic, I guess. And we both have been in this field for so many years now. And frankly, I've never got a chance to ask this question. So before we go into something more serious, and I want to keep it fairly technical for the rest of the interview, can you kind of tell me how does it feel like to have one of the scaling features of Ethereum named after your name, the Dankrad? Like where did the name came from? What's the story here?
It certainly feels very strange, yeah, I tried for a long time to come up with a backronym for it so that it wouldn't officially be my name, but unfortunately it didn't succeed. And I don't know, it was more of like an accident of history that some internal name from our calls became kind of the official way people started referring to it.
Yeah, it just feels like, this is maybe a mischievous way to keep it in a space. Now you can't leave, right? Like you're Ethereum. You guys must have remembered the block size wars back in 2017 with Bitcoin that essentially resulted in the split in the community. So before I go into Ethereum scaling, were you a big blocker or a small blocker at the time?
Well, I wasn't actually really that deep in crypto or part of any community, so I would not say that I had a strong opinion back during that time. And yeah, I would probably also say that I'm kind of philosophically a small blocker, but pragmatically a big blocker. And to explain what that means is I respected how the Bitcoin community decided to enforce their will against the miners. So I think that was a great milestone in blockchain history. But on the other hand, I would probably have said pragmatically at certain points in the Ethereum past, I would have been well, we could have made blocks a little bit bigger.
It just feels to me a little bit when I was following the discussions on raising gas limit, and this is almost the core of our argument, that you came as an extreme big blocker, almost, right? Yeah. And there was some pushback from the community, from some members of the community. However, that was nothing like we witnessed in Bitcoin. It was short-lived, and seems like now community seems to be rallying, behind raising gas limit. What's your take here? How do you see this? Because
right. I mean, the difference in the situation is that we actually have a story on how to really keep the values that we care about, which I think are really about verifiability and censorship resistance, which previously, the story used to be, well, you have to have these small nodes that you can run at home, and we can now achieve them without making these kind of the center tenet of Ethereum. I think we should really care about the properties of the system that we're building rather than I guess the inner workings.
So I've heard the following arguments from, let's call them small blockers, right? The main one essentially goes about the current gas price. This is very, very low, at least for Ethereum. It seems like the users have moved to L2s, which is what we kind of wanted in the original rollup-centric roadmap. And now the ETH price have, gone down, so maybe now everybody's concerned that the L2s have grown too big, right? And we don't have a good way of pricing, this growth, and there's this existential threat that they might be too big and Ethereum too small, I guess, that they might break off eventually, right? So is it all about the ETH price? Like if ETH was 10K, you know, that wouldn't be a concern, or over something else? Because frankly, I'm not entirely clear like what we're trying to achieve here. Are we trying to bring users back to L1? And I'm thinking short term, right? Like let's like put away the discussion on ZK EVMs and whatnot. Like short term, are we trying to get all these users from L2 back to L1 to pump the price of ETH a little bit up, or are we trying to get users from Solana? Like what are we trying to do here?
Yeah, right. So I guess like we have to see. I mean, it's a complicated question. I think like it comes to like there certainly is like an economic question in the background that like it does seem much harder. For example, to like maybe like 5 years ago we imagined that like everyone wants to be on Ethereum and therefore like they pay whatever for the Ethereum data available, so it doesn't really matter whether they own L1 and L2. And that has just turned out not to be true. And maybe we were a bit naive in that. So there is an economic question about this, but I do think that the economic question also ties back into the Ethereum project, even if you see it from a pure cultural and values aspect, because I do think that, for example, at least the situation where there's one breakout roll-up that basically captures, say, a huge amount of economic value, while the Ethereum L1 doesn't, that would fundamentally change the relationship between the two and would actually lead to a world where we would have less ability to like pursue our values. So I do think it is good to keep the economic relationship in check as well. So I do think it's better to have like a strong L1, and I think this is right now the best way I see how we can achieve that.
And how strong L1 will affect the ETH price? We'll see, right?
Hard to predict.
So
I mean, there are a lot of things going on there. So.
So I think the question that everyone probably keeps asking, I mean, this is by far the most common question that you must have heard, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that. Now that the focus seems to be on scaling L1, obviously everybody is wondering how does it really affect L2s, and maybe before you answer, because you know you get to answer this question probably every single day, I'll just throw two quotes. One is probably quite known from Anatoly from Solana. Like he says, "My job here is done. I don't have to make fun of the L2 roadmap anymore." But you know, I mean, he's from Solana, right? So maybe he's not the guy to listen here. However, 2 days ago, Synthetics, which is one of the oldest DeFi protocols, and one of the earliest adopters of L2, because they were the first protocol that actually went live on Optimism testnet. If you guys don't know that, it's like a Ethereum scaling history of sorts. They actually wrote in their blog, L2s are dead. The experiment is over, and Synthetics is going all in on L1, right? And I don't know, I mean, that sounds to me like very harsh words. So I wonder, I mean, maybe they were always too extreme, right? Like, you know, maybe they were too early, and now they like, I don't know, going too far.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complicated question. I mean, like the very direct way to see is just like the way we, and it wasn't necessarily that we had to do it this way, but the way we started doing roll-ups made them be in some ways like a kind of direct competition with Ethereum mainnet. And for like a long time we were like okay with it because we were like there's no other way of doing it. And now the question becomes a bit more complex. But I don't think that has to mean that, it definitely doesn't have to mean that we have to be like enemies or so in any way, right? I think like
with L2s, right?
Yes, exactly. Like there are many good ways in which we collaborate. I think for me the big difference is just that I would probably in some ways agree with Kane here, not in all ways, but I would agree with him that I would like to have his project on L1, and like there's nothing wrong with that, with us saying like we would like them to stay and focus on it. That doesn't mean they can't also be on L2, but like I guess like we will have a bit more of an active role of like also developing the L1. And I think there are probably things in DeFi where we would see them like a little bit more like critically, and we were like, yes, we want lots of liquidity on L1 and not all of it on L2s. And for other things, like we would be less concerned and would be like, oh yeah, like there are applications where we're quite happy if they continue being on L2s. Their scale can never be provided by the L1, and so like they can continue being there.
So maybe the issue was that we had one tech for building L2s, but different competing visions of what L2s were actually meant to represent, like sovereign zones with really good internal interoperability, but not necessarily external, like very similar to, let's say, commercial banks settling on a central bank, right? We don't use central bank to keep our accounts. The actual commercial banks keep the accounts on. So Ethereum was supposed to be like the settlement layer.
Right.
So that was one vision. The second vision is like this model thesis where tens of thousands of rollups, like little tiny building blocks, impossible for L2B to track. That's to me completely different vision. The third one was that they should be like an extension of Ethereum, right? Like interoperable to the point that it should be all seen as one huge sharded chains. And like to me, these visions were like different, and maybe there was no guidance from Ethereum Foundation. Like what are we actually building here?
Right.
So,
well, I mean, the Ethereum Foundation has taken, in the past, a very hands-off role in the whole thing, and I think it's shifting a little back. It's probably not going to go all the way the other way now, but I would say like more closer to the ecosystem and more actively involved again.
So what is your personal vision today for rollups specifically? And can you also comment on this, this idea of the execute opcode, and how does it actually fit into this vision?
Oh, okay. I mean, two very different questions.
But they are kind of related, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one is more short term, the other one is more like medium or long term.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if I have like a grand vision for this. For me, this is more like, I mean, it's not that I have a grand vision for other chains or for apps or whatever either. So like, I think like it is a natural thing to exist, and it's great, and like we can coexist and collaborate in many ways. There are probably some things where it would be like, it's a more natural fit, and there will be, I guess you can say, like less of a competitive dynamic if like the rollups go more into like the app-specific direction or into applications that are not tied to DeFi and so on. Yeah, that's how I think about it at the moment.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about scaling data availability, because this is how we started, and having Dankrad name into it, is a certain responsibility. And if anyone's interested in scaling VM, zkVM, that's going to be like a different conversation, right? So data availability. Celestia has announced that they have on testnet 128 megabytes blocks. They're trying to build gigabyte blocks, and seems like we're so much behind. What's your take? Like, I mean, I remember your talk from Amsterdam a few years ago when you said that the sharding, sharding generally of data should be the top priority. I mean, you're certainly not happy with where we are you?
Yes, I am. I mean, okay, so there's a complicated question. There are several layers to this. Like, one is that, I do believe that we have been not ambitious enough with Ethereum in the past, and we have to realize that we have to have a somewhat consistent offering with the market. Otherwise, the pure, extreme sort of cypherpunk concepts are not going to sell. On data availability, it's especially hard because, so with Celestia, I would ask them the question back, like, how are you going to get sampling for like a gigabyte per second? Because if you have a few thousand sampling nodes, this means you're talking about many megabytes per second
but Ethereum
of
will have
sampling.
more nodes, right?
Per node, yes, of course. Like if your vision is to have millions of nodes, that's great. But I mean, that is also a very, very hard thing to achieve. Like so I think yes, there are many questions about this to be answered as well. And I think this is a real question that everyone, as a data layer, for example, will have to ask themselves where they see themselves on that spectrum. And I actually would say I don't have the answer even for Ethereum right now, because traditionally, yes, we have gone the very conservative route and said, okay, like we only want to do data availability if it has these very high security guarantees. But then the question is like, is that actually valuable to anyone, what we're building? Like this is unclear at the moment.
Yeah, and the conservative almost feels to me like this is a big bet from Ethereum that the people will care, right? And they will actually pay for it, and they will prefer to use Ethereum as a settlement layer because, you know, it's like arguably the most decentralized after Bitcoin, but you can't do much on Bitcoin, right? So, you know, like institutions should like use Ethereum almost as a default. However, this is not what I see, you know? I mean, Ethereum is dominating, yes, but I think the issue is more political rather than, you know, tech-oriented. And I would be personally very concerned, you know, if there's like more lobbying for, let's say, Solana or for something else. I mean, how do we convince, you know, the big stakeholders here, and by them I mean institutions, that Ethereum is the best place for, let's say, RWAs, for example, right? Because it's like the most decentralized. Do they even care? And if they don't, then again, what are we building?
Well, I mean, I think, yes, this is like kind of where you have to find the middle ground where what you're offering actually works. And I do think we can build a lot of things there, but I think it is hard to find that ground. And I think like on data availability, for example, we still have to find it. We still have to find what is actually the right offering. We have started. I think what we have now is definitely not good enough. Like we need to build a lot more. But what exactly, that is, I think, a big question for the coming years. I think on the, like surprisingly on the L1 scaling, it was a little bit easier to actually figure out, because I think we can see where the technology is going and what we can probably do in a few years without like too much compromise, but also what is a good enough offering. Like for example, I am quite confident that the 100x scaled L1 will do a lot for users and will be very valuable for the world. But on the data question, I think there's a lot to figure out right now.
So when I like look at Celestia, EigenDA, and Ethereum, I mean, I see Celestia trying to be as much decentralized as possible with the novel P2P network built, you know, for supporting those mammoth blocks, as they call it. On the other hand, EigenDA is like, you know, cranking the volume as much as they can by being centralized and saying that it doesn't really matter so much because, you know, they like settling to Ethereum, and this is where the ordering comes from. So very, very different like set of trade-offs, right? And it's like you said, I mean, do we know exactly what trade-offs are we pursuing with Ethereum? In other words, can Ethereum support as much, you know, blob space as Celestia? Like technically, is there any reason why Ethereum cannot, in the future, you know, support that much DA, or that would like go against some values of whatever they are?
Well, I mean, like technically, like again, the question is like, what trade-offs are you willing to make? For example, like, yeah, right now the most fundamental ultimate limit is how many nodes are sampling. And I guess we can try to get a lot more sampling nodes, but that will also be very hard work. And I think like we can do things there. And I think like what we're doing now also with Scale the L1 will push in the right direction, because we are adding much lighter nodes to the whole system as well. So we can have more of these. But I think, at least from what I've seen so far, pushing to millions of nodes is going to be very tough.
And then how does it sort of compare to EigenDA, where, you know, you don't really sample anything, you just like disperse, you know, chunks, and that's it, and with no P2P network at all.
With no
P2P network, right?
Right. Well, I think actually the peer-to-peer network is not really the critical part in making it like verifiable by a large number of nodes. But the sampling is, I do think they want to do that, and I do think they have.
Yeah, it's a plan, but
yeah, yes.
Okay, I was asked for 5 minutes for the audience to also ask questions from Dankrad, but before we do it, I started on a light one. I'm going to end on a light one because we could go like really for hours, going deeper and deeper, and this is always a great opportunity, to be able to chat. But my final question to you is like, why did you stop blogging? I really appreciated your blogs, and I think they were great explainers for the community of hard concepts, right? Like people are so confused about like what does it even mean? The censorship resistance, the 51% attacks, and whatnot. Not to mention the famous KZG explainer that everybody that I talk to say like, yeah, I mean I've read that Dankrad's post, and finally I got it. So. And I checked, and it's been 3 years, Dankrad. Like,
yeah. Well, actually, I don't know. I had.
So I'm like representing the community call. Like please blog more.
Then I think my suggestion would be if there's something where you would really like an explainer, then hit me up, and I will think if that's something. I mean, it used to be more natural, and I think I guess for me right now we're in a very different stage in some ways, so it has become harder. So there were fewer topics where I felt naturally, but if there are things that pop up where you think this would be a great topic, then yeah, just hit me up and I will think if I can write a blog about it.
Okay, let me give it to the audience. We probably have time for like maybe 2 questions, right? Or?
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions for Bartek and Dankrad?
Hi, so I have this question here to the. Hi, so I have this question about why focus on scaling DA, right? Because we see, at least last I checked, that the blob price is essentially 0. So it seems like the demand is met. Is it the fact that we're anticipating more demand, and essentially how it plays out with the focus on L2s being more application specific? Will they then use more DA? What's the vision?
So I don't think that present mainnet demand is actually a very good way to measure this right now, because we do know that there is a substantial amount of latent demand that's not coming on Ethereum blobs, because like, for example, layer 2s like Celo simply like already when they made the decision, they looked at it and were like, well, there's no way we can go there. Polygon, which might not have now have changed strategy, I'm not sure, but we were also talking to them like a couple of years ago, and they were like, well, we can't like put it on blobs, right? So there's definitely a question of like which projects can even commit to being a rollup given the current throughput, and it's not a lot, right? Many of them can't. It's a very big commitment, because you're basically saying, I can never have more than these transactions, and like by scaling it more, we are losing that. What we can also like achieve is simply like, I mean, it's a similar question to scaling the L1, right? Like if I want to build a project, and that's especially a big project like a rollup where I'm going to do a lot of BD, I want to know that there is capacity for future growth. So I think like right now the answer is like, what we have right now is simply not good enough. Like it's almost meaningless if you want to build a big project. Like you simply cannot commit to build it on Ethereum DA and at the current level. So I think we definitely have to go away from there no matter what.
So for me, if I can like add one thing, if I see, let's say, on-chain games using all DA, I'm not concerned. If I see apps like Celo using all DA, I am concerned. There's really no reason why they should use all DA, and I guess I'm not going to be satisfied unless they can use, just for the security, right? I mean, we're talking people's funds, and we're talking projects with very significant TVL using extremely insecure all DA bridges today. To the point that, at L2Beat, we're actually making this effort of trying to like push them really hard, to use a good DA bridge, but we found that this is actually hard. It's a hard task to convince people that this is important because then, questions come up, like who's running this DA bridge, who's the relayer there, right? Who can upgrade, what is the upgrade delay of this bridge? I mean, all sorts of, like Pandora box of questions that no one, and who's paying for this, right?
Another question for the panel? If not, then we'll wrap up
I have
there.
one more. Can I have one more?
Okay, yeah, of course, please.
Like, what are the main points of disagreement with you and Vitalik?
Ooh.
Because like the reason I'm asking you this is that I heard rumors that there are some.
Rumors of?
That there are some.
There
are some points that you disagree with Vitalik. No, just kidding. But
we had, well, I don't know. I think like once we discuss, we can usually like come to an agreement. Like we had recently some discussions. They're public as well. You can see it like about provers. Like, do we need to be able to run provers at home? And like I said, well, it's like a nice long-term goal, but it's really like not the thing we should be most concerned about right now. Also, given that like the technology will advance massively. And I think like I had more discussions recently with him, and he was like, oh, actually, like he's come around to that, and I think it makes much more sense to just check that there are lots of alternatives to get the GPUs that you need, rather than insisting on it being at home. So I don't know, like yeah, I don't know if there are really very big disagreements right now.
That's good to hear. I mean, we don't want these guys to to really disagree, I guess. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I hope that it was useful.
Please, a round of applause for Bartek and Dankrad.